Sundays when we've been talking about rest, then you've heard Cheryl Volmer come up and issue a challenge to you. Her challenge was find some space in your week to try out this Sabbath thing, to try out this rest thing, this peace and quiet thing. And I don't know if you've had an opportunity to do that or not yet, but what we're doing today will make it a real possibility. So if even you haven't tried it yet, you're going to get a chance to try it. She's not here today, but she did text me this morning, and she wanted me to read to you her text, just sort of as a wrap-up to what she had been saying about her trying to take a rest. And this is what she said. My rest from Facebook was rewarding. Is that what she'd been talking about, taking a break from Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that was her strategy to get some peace and quiet into her life. So she says, my rest from Facebook was rewarding. I made the choice a year ago that I could only look at Facebook once a week, then once every 2 weeks, and then once a month. I started feeling so much better or free from staying off of it that I didn't even think about it, and I still don't. Reviewing others' posts that were strangers or those not closest to me, it was robbing me of my time and my emotional space. I found some posts provoking, heartbreaking, or they put me in comparative thinking. Oh, I guess comparing herself to these people all the time. And that's what I was filling my space with for an hour at a time. When I would grab my phone in a comfy spot to read Facebook, I could hear God saying, you could be in my word. I hope you'll continue to review your time spent on social media and challenge yourself to rest from it. I do think you guys have a unique challenge with this in your lives. I happen to be old enough that this is not something that was in my life when I was a teenager. I don't think I even had a mobile phone in my life in college. I think that entered my life once I was a young married person. But even those phones have nothing on what you have access to today. And I even find myself with this thing on me all the time. Always checking any buzz, any vibration, anything. I better whip it out and look at it. And it robs me instantly of the present moment. So I think it's kind of cool that that's what she has challenged herself on, is to remove herself from technology where she can. Well, I have some stuff to give to you today, not because you have a lot of work to do, but I want you to have something to operate from today. But before I get it to you, I want to hear from you about the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, David Roper was in here talking about rest. I didn't get to be in here, so I don't know what was talked about that day. And then last week, we had my friend Leslie Hawks in here, and she sort of took us through this sort of breathing, Holy Spirit kind of exercise that was, from my perspective, kind of relaxing, kind of weird, but kind of relaxing. From the last 2 weeks, what has stuck? What has stayed in your minds about this concept of rest? What did Leslie do or say? What did David do or say? What did someone in the room say that maybe made you hold on to that a little longer than just this hour? Ruach. Say more about Ruach. He does it. Yeah.
Something that he said a couple times there.
Yeah. Even after you left here, even during the week. That's so cool. So Ruach was from last week when Leslie was up here. She was perched in a beanbag, which I'm going to try to do in a minute. It's so against my, self to perch here while I'm teaching. But she sat here and she said that word Ruach throughout her entire talk. And the idea was that Ruach is the breath of God, and that we are all filled with it from the beginning of our lives to the end of our lives. And she used it as this breathing technique where you couldn't help but take big, deep breaths and fill up and then let it out repeatedly. And for me, that kind of exercise totally calms me down.
Ruach in Hebrew means breath of God within us.
And I wish we had seen that. We didn't have the word up here. There's the way it's spelled in English. Yeah. But to see it in Hebrew would have been pretty cool too. But yeah, we didn't have it up on the screen. What do you have, Kate?
I felt like this was very crazy week for me in school and outside of school, and so there was a lot of time for us to like stop, kind of like say and repeat that to myself and just think first and try to kind of calm myself down.
I like it. Eric.
So you kind of went over it, and I know it's stuck with a lot of people, but how last week Leslie talked about the first and last thing we do is breathe, which is also kind of in a way saying God's name. I thought that was really cool. And also, David kind of, I think David kind of went over it, but it was how like we're not really resting from everything. We're just kind of resting from the things that distract us more from getting closer to Jesus. And I just like that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, those are good words. I wish I'd heard David's. I'm not sure. Maybe I was in a different class, but yeah, the thing Leslie said last week about how I guess Yahweh is Hebrew for God, correct? And so just in the way that you say the word Yahweh, it feels like breathing. And what was neat is that we breathe. She said the first thing we do as a child when we're born is we take a big breath and cry. And then when we die, the last thing we do is we take a breath. And that in all of those moments, our breathing sounds a lot like saying the name of God. And how powerful that is, that God is present. Just present from beginning to end. Very comforting for me to know that I'm not in this thing alone. What else? Anything else stick from the last couple of weeks? I mean, it was kind of weird. Last week was kind of strange. But we leaned into the strange and it was okay. How about beanbags?
Yes.
Are we a fan?
Yes.
Not the ladies so much. But the ladies know that beanbags are here. They can just adjust their attire if necessary. But I don't know that the beanbags will be here after Thanksgiving. They'll probably make their way back to the crazy room of 6th and 7th graders. You don't think so? Well, I'm trying to think, when we get back from Thanksgiving, what we're going to do, what we're going to talk about is what they're talking about in the sanctuary in New Heights, which will be Advent. And so we'll be speaking on a lot of the things that DMAC is talking on, and Dinah and Daryl are talking on in New Heights. So I don't know if beanbags will be, maybe they'll be appropriate. Maybe they don't want them back in junior high and we can have them in here. But maybe we can also set up some chairs too for people that don't want to sit.
I don't think junior high wants them back. I'm just gonna.
Well, I think they want them back. You can't trust them. They're rowdy.
But they're good without.
Rowdy in their beanbags, and that turns me into something that's less than pleasant.
Therefore, the senior high will be the stewards of the beanbag.
Maybe so, because you're pretty rock solid. Well, I want to give to you what we're reading from today. I'm going to do a little talking like this with you, and then we're going to do a little teaching from the paper. But when you get it, you can just kind of hold on to it for now. And then Janice, in a little while, we're going to want pens, and so we might want to pass some pens around as well. Here, we'll start this on this side. If you'll just grab one. We'll pass those kind of back in there and pass those kind of in there. See if everybody can get a copy. And then ultimately we'll get you a pen for something later on.
Oh, that is
Oh, that was late, yeah.
You don't really have to do anything with the pen just yet, but if you get inspired, feel free to take a note or two, whatever you want to hold on to for the duration.
I was going to
All right. So, here's where I want to start today. It is incredibly clear to me in my life, with my family, because I've got 2 of you in my house, plus a 10-year-old in my house. And so it's very clear to me that as much as we might be told we need to rest, it's difficult. I find it very hard to stop all of the goings on in my life to rest. For me, I feel guilty. I feel like that if I don't keep working on the pile of things that are this high to be done, they're not going to get done. Something's going to go wrong. I'm going to fail. And so I say, okay, when this pile is gone, that's when I can rest. But the way I've seen life goes is that my pile is never gone. It's added to. What in your life right now goes on the pile of things to do? What in your life right now keeps you from resting? What are the distractions? What is the stuff that's in the way? What's the stuff that's in the way? Homework, practice, school in general, just attending school maybe.
You need like an hour of stress time. It's like, oh no, I have like
Okay.
gotta watch the college football.
Okay, so we have things like school and homework and practices to attend, those things that sometimes feel like have-tos. But then like Sammy just brought up, there's the stuff that you want to do. You want to sit and watch NFL this afternoon.
Yeah.
You want to watch college football yesterday. You want to go to the game Friday night. You want to hang out with your friends. You want to play jungle. You want to show up for the youth stuff. You want to check Instagram. That's what's killer about this, is that it's not like all the things that keep us from resting are awful things we don't want to do. We have plenty of things that are fun to do that might still be robbing us of rest. Kind of like Cheryl said in her post, that there is an element, I get it, of enjoyment to flipping through Instagram. There is an element of it. But the part that kills me is when I look up and see how much time I just spent. Or when I do what she says, I start comparing my boring little life to the very exciting little lives I see here and wonder what's wrong with me. Then I suddenly go, well, that really wasn't restful at all. Now I just feel crappy about myself. Now I just wasted this time where I could have been sleeping. It's good.
Sleep is fun.
It is really good, okay? So yeah, we have tons of things in our way, which is one of the things we're going to talk about today, is that getting rest is going to take discipline. The irony is that to get rest, sometimes we got to work really hard to get there. We got to work hard to discipline ourselves to make the time for rest, okay? What I want to do is pick up with the paper that I gave you. We're just going to read through this. We've done this before where we read a little bit and we talk a little bit. And I'm going to ask you if you want to read so that you don't have to hear my voice all the time. So if you want to read, you can read a little bit. We'll stop, we'll talk, we'll ask questions, we'll agree, we'll disagree, we'll wonder. And then when we get through this, I have something I want you to try. Okay? Anybody want to start reading for us off this page? Okay, you want to read a paragraph or two?
Okay.
Go for it.
Did you know that we are commanded to rest? It says so in Exodus 20, right in the middle of the commandments. You and your family are to remember the Sabbath day, set it apart, and keep it holy. You have 6 days to do all your work, but the seventh day is to be different. It is the Sabbath of the eternal your God. Keep it holy by not doing any work, not you, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, or any outsiders living among you. For the Eternal made the heavens above, the earth below, the seas, and all the creatures in them in 6 days. Then on the seventh day he rested. That is why he blessed the Sabbath day and made it sacred. Exodus 28-11.
So when I read that, my first thought is, yes, God said I gotta rest. It's a commandment. It's in there. The command to rest is as important as the command to not murder, to not lie, to not steal. And for some reason, the command to rest doesn't carry the same weight as those commandments. Why do you think that is? What do you think that is?
I think it's really on to do with the society that we live in.
Say more about that.
America is seen as a life opportunity where you can get better and you are rewarded for your work. So if you work hard, then possibly good things will come to you. So, in the society that we live in, it is revered more than the rest is.
You set me up for the next thing we're going to read. That is beautiful. Is it Cindy? Awesome. I think that is a big part. I agree with why in this country we live in, maybe even this little community we live in, where high achieving matters. I'm suddenly remembering the class rankings being passed out and what that creates in people. I just goes rock. Because achieving matters, working hard matters, to get where you want to go matters. And when you put rest up against that, it seems to be opposed to it. How in the world can I get ahead? How can I get to the college I want to? How can I be in the top 10% if I'm not working hard all the time and doing this mountain of homework that I've been given? Mary, did you ever get that? You got something?
Going off that, it's kind of weird, but I feel like it's easier to stay awake than it is to murder people, so I feel like that's why we kind of blow this one off more, just because it's easier to do than murder.
Yeah, it's kind of been pushed to the side a little bit, and nothing has seemed to gone wrong yet. So maybe we can just leave our resting to the side. I've heard it said, I can rest when I die. Well, yeah, but what about now? I feel like I might need a little bit of it right now.
I was going to struggle with it because I'm holy by not doing any work. And my Sundays tend to not be that holy. Yeah, like coming to church, going to a 4-hour dance rehearsal, coming back to church, going home, doing homework, going to bed.
Well, you know, and that reminds me and then what we're going to be talking about is that maybe your Sabbath is not Sunday. Maybe your Sabbath needs to be at a different time that works for you and your friends and your family. Because I'm the same way. In our family, both my husband and I work at church, so Sunday doesn't feel like Sabbath. Sunday feels like work. And so our family, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, we do our Shabbat or Sabbath taking from Friday to Saturday. And it's still difficult. It's still difficult not to fill it up. As my day yesterday showed, it was full of other things that were not Sabbath for me.
There's a lot of times, especially like teachers in my school, they aren't considering our need for rest, and so they just kind of they work the priority and not rest the priority. So they're like, do this before you get to do anything else. So that's
I agree. I think our world does not set us up for rest. I think our world fights against rest, and we have to fight back.
I was going to say that too because last week was really busy because I usually keep Saturdays for not working, and then if I have any homework I usually do it on Friday or after school or on Sunday. But it's mostly because last week was really stressful for me because I had a lot of tests and assignments due, and I had a project due, and then I had tech rehearsal for a play I'm doing that's in January till 6:30, and that made everything more hard. I had to do the homework during school, and I was just like, ugh. So usually it's Saturday, and then today, this week's going to be easier, I think, in a way, because yes, I have a test to study for this tomorrow, but after that, we're going on a field trip, and even though it's going to take some thinking, it's probably not going to be as hard as last week was, so I'm really grateful for that.
Good. One more thing, Derek.
So we're talking about how maybe Sunday isn't a Saturday for all of us. I know it's not for me because when I have homework on the weekend, I completely procrastinate. So now I have a pile of homework to do after church. So that kind of is a problem for me as to why I don't really have many Sabbath days, because even when I do put work aside, I'm still stressing about it, so it doesn't give me time to rest.
Okay, then let's keep reading, because that's the other thing, is sometimes even when we try to rest, we're still internally stressing out about what's not being done. And that's not what the Sabbath is about. The Sabbath is not meant to stress you out more as you're trying to rest. Somebody read for me the next few paragraphs. Anybody want to read? Got it, go.
The Hebrew people received these words from God via Moses. They hadn't been away from Egypt in slavery for very long. I would guess it was still very much part of their lives and their ways of thinking and living. It was all they had known, and there is a kind of security in that. But their security, what they could count on, in Pharaoh looked something like this. Terrible, inhumane treatment, building bricks began and again, day after day, working really hard 24/7, no rest, no stopping, no end in sight. An ongoing sense of anxiety and what if supplies run out mindset displayed by Pharaoh. Lives of exhaustion because Pharaoh needed the Hebrews to stay that way.
Read one more paragraph.
But when the Hebrew people escaped slavery and followed Moses towards the promised land, it wasn't easy either. They even thought it might be better to go back to Egypt and just be slaves again. Egypt was familiar, it was a known quantity. But then came the Ten Commandments, a list of principles from God meant to counter the ways and narrative of Pharaoh. Not a bunch of rules to fence people in and make them unhappy. A bunch of good ideas meant to bring freedom to the slave. And one of those good ideas was Sabbath, rest. Turns out you get a Sabbath in the wilderness. Who knew?
A few minutes ago, Mackenzie was saying that one of the things that's kind of conspiring against us to rest is this need to achieve. We live in a country especially that wants to work really hard, that believes that the way you get ahead, the way you get what you want, the way you make your dreams come true, is if you work really, really hard all the time, as evidenced by how many hours your parents probably work now. Why both parents are out working really hard all the time trying to make your dreams come true. Be financially secure, get you to college, get you clothing and food and shelter. It sounds a lot like Pharaoh to me. There was a time in our ancestors' history where they were enslaved in Egypt. For hundreds of years, the Hebrew people were slaves, and they did this. They worked all the time. They weren't treated well. And it was simply because the guy in charge, Pharaoh, was worried. He lived in anxiety. He worried that supplies would run out, that he wouldn't have what he needed. So he kept people working all the time, because as long as we're working, we're safe, we're secure, we have what we need. I hadn't realized that before, that maybe that mentality was created by Pharaoh to keep people down and to keep himself secure. So people live this way for hundreds of years to where it becomes normal. And when Moses comes on the scene and says, no more, we're not here anymore, we're not slaves anymore, come with me. We're going to the promised land. They initially think, awesome, great, wonderful. But it's difficult when you leave what you've known. It always makes me, when I hear this story, I always think about the movie Shawshank Redemption.
Yes.
If you've ever seen the Shawshank Redemption, there's a scene in the movie where this really old man has been in prison for most of his life. It's really all that he knows. He hardly remembers what it's like to be out in the free world. And at some point when he's like, I don't know, 70, he finally gets to the end of his sentence and he's released. And if you've seen this part, he gets released, but he doesn't want to leave. They like have to push him out of prison because it is so incredibly scary on the other side to him that prison, bondage, is preferable to him than freedom. And I always think about this with the Hebrew people, is that it was hard, but it was all they knew. So they get out there, they're in the wilderness with Moses, they get the 10 Commandments. And one of the 10 Commandments is rest. Because your God is a God of freedom. Your God is not a God of, we're going to run out, there's not enough, you better be worried. This God that rescued them from Egypt is a God of enough. of abundance. And what's so amazing to me is that the 10 Commandments are part of that abundance. We sometimes think the 10 Commandments are a bunch of rules we have to live by and it's going to make life really not fun. The 10 Commandments were given so that these people that were in bondage could be freer. We're now commanded to rest. You must take a day off. You must stop doing your work and rest. God said so. I found that to be really powerful. That right there makes me want to go, if they can do it, I can do it. Somebody else read for me. We're at the very bottom paragraph. Who wants to read the bottom and maybe go on to the next page? Anybody want to read? Thank you, sir. An Old Testament scholar at the bottom, and just go on to the next page.
Old Testament scholar Walter
Brueggemann.
Wrote, Sabbath is not about worship, it is about work stoppage. It is about withdrawal from the anxiety system of Pharaoh, the refusal to let one's life be defined by production and consumption by the endless pursuit of private.
You keep going as far as you want.
Okay. Similarly, Dallas always says, the command is do no work, just make space. Attend to what is around you. Learn that you don't have to do to be. Accept the grace of doing nothing. Stay with it until you stop dragging you to work. My own family has been observing Sabbath. We call it Shabbat at our house for more than 2 years. We picked from Friday night and Saturday night as our Shabbat time. Mostly because my husband and I both work on Sunday, and that's never particularly restful. Our observance changes from week to week. Sometimes we have other families over to our house and we eat together and talk together and play together. Other times it's just the 5 of us, eating takeout and piling on the couch for a movie. But always we start the evening with Shabbat blessings and lighting the candles. Each family member has a role. My kids have even memorized portions of the blessing, having said them each week. And we pray for each other and thank God for each other.
Okay. So, a couple of years ago, and I think I've said this in here before, my husband and I got to go to Israel on this study trip for a couple of weeks. And when we were in Israel, one of the things that we were witness to twice was Shabbat. And Shabbat is just the Hebrew word for Sabbath or rest or taking a break. And while we were there, we would be on our tour, we'd be doing things, traveling places, going and doing and whatever. But we would notice that every Friday afternoon that we were there was like an intentional buildup of activity all afternoon long as families and businesses prepared to shut down for the Sabbath. You would see people getting ready, bringing out tables, getting ready to feed people. And then at sundown on Friday, everything stopped. Restaurants weren't open. People weren't working. And from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, people rested and they hung out with their families. And we were struck by that because we don't come from a place where things shut down. Even on Christmas Day, things don't completely shut down anymore. And so we were really struck by the idea that this community of people could all get on the same page and they could all stop whatever it was they were doing and say for the next 24 hours, that stuff is going to be on pause. That work, that assignment, that project, that activity, we're just going to pause it right over here and we're going to rest and then we can pick that back up later. Somehow they have figured out that if they take a break, nothing's going to happen. Things aren't going to go wrong, stuff's not going to fall apart. And they even manage to rest without feeling anxious about it and worrying about the stuff that's sitting off to the side. Anybody else want to keep reading? I'll read. I think our family's intentional practice of Shabbating has truly soaked into our daily fabric of life. We look forward to the end of the week when we can shut it all down and give ourselves permission to just rest and enjoy the lives we have and the people we love. This weekly rest, regular and rhythmic, is making us more fully alive because we are stopping those things we do every other day and setting this time apart. We are reconnecting to our true identity as God's people, beloved sons and daughters who have a home in which to rest. When our family engages in Shabbat, we find God there. I love how this quote from Anita Diamant expresses it. The Sabbath is a weekly cathedral raised up in my dining room, in my family, and in my heart. Now that's what we do. Our family decided 2 years ago to pick Friday night as the beginning of our Sabbath, and that's what we do. We bring people over, we eat, we hang out. It's kids, it's parents, it's everybody. It's nutty. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just 5 of us. The hard part is this: going to bed and waking up the next morning and remembering it's still Sabbath. That Saturday is also a continuation of not resting, and I'm the worst about it. I get up and I start doing laundry and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have to do this today. You can wait. So the hard part for me in Shabbating or in having Sabbath is being disciplined enough to really do it and not to fall prey to the pile of things I have to do and say it's okay for those things to wait. Does it help to know that God wants you to rest? That God commands you to rest? That it's not an option, it's not a lifestyle choice? Or is that still not enough to make you rest? What about actually planning your Sabbath, scheduling it, and then making it happen? Creating a Sabbath that works for you has got to involve things that make you feel rested and restored, not more tired after they're done. It's got to have stuff that's good for you, that makes you feel better, and you've got to include things that you enjoy. The idea here is that you celebrate being, but not necessarily doing. You've got to give yourself permission to lay there and do nothing. It's really okay. It's like Dallas Willard says, once the jerking and the squirming and the feeling bad about it subside, the rest is good. It's vital. It's profoundly restorative. But trying to wedge a quiet day or even a few hours into 21st century life can be a tricky thing. The world around us doesn't always help us to create Sabbath either. It will take discipline, and it helps to do this in community, like with a group of friends or with your family. Now that's a thought. In a minute, when I get you guys thinking about your Shabbat, your Sabbath, you might think about, how can I get other people to do this with me? Maybe if you got a group of friends and committed to a certain time or to a certain activity and you were going to Shabbat together. Or maybe you and your family. Or maybe it's just you and one other person. But Sabbath is infinitely easier if you have people on your team and you're not trying to be having a Sabbath while the rest of the world around you is doing other things. It's hard that way. You'll give up on it that way. But like our family, we're a team. And we know that when Shabbat happens, it happens. And the more people we involve in it, the more our activities kind of move around it. It's kind of like when you see a big, huge rock in the middle of a stream. What does the water do with the rock? It typically goes around it and continues on its way. And that's what we're working toward, is our lives to work around Shabbat, so that we don't plan things during it unless it's restful.
I think one thing I struggle with is finding moments of rest in my week and not like quote unquote living for the weekend, which I catch myself doing, of working super hard just so I can have that good break. And while that's important, I think finding those moments of rest.
Yeah. So maybe it's like little mini Sabbaths. You allow yourself, when you get home from school every day, you give yourself 1 hour where you don't worry about school. You don't do chores. You just veg out in front of the TV. Or maybe it's an hour before you go to bed. You just shut everything down. Even if there's a test tomorrow, you say the next hour is for me to relax. And that's okay to do. Maybe your Sabbath isn't going to be a full day on the weekend. Maybe it's going to be this time or this time during the week, and see how it goes. But when we choose to rest, we choose to count on God's provision. that God can take care of whatever it is that needs doing or working on, that God can make a way for us to really rest. What if we just gave it a whirl? And that goes back to what Barrett said, that if we will trust God with the resting time, we can also trust God to handle all the stuff that's going to need to be put on pause while we rest. It will be okay. The world won't end, your ranking won't end, your team won't end if you simply take a break. You might find that you're better for it. Here's what I'd like you to do for the next remaining minutes. You can do this by yourself, you can do this with people around you, but I gave you a page on the back where I would be really interested in you planning a Sabbath for yourself or for your family or for your friends. It asks you to think about, when could you Sabbath next? When's the next time in your life that you could carve out a small amount of time and be okay with resting? Could it be later today? Could it be next week? But on this page, pick a time that you think could work. And then start planning it out. What are you going to do at that time? Are you going to say, what I'm going to do during that time is I'm going to go for a run. That makes me feel rested. Or maybe you're going to say, I'm going to go spend time with my friends. That's going to be friend time because it makes me feel rested and restored.
I'm gonna watch the Packer game.
Watch the Packer game.
I'm not gonna watch it.
Jarvis Landry.
Pick a time, pick some stuff, figure out, be intentional. That's the only way this stuff happens. You know this. You only do well at school when you're intentional. You only do well with your team and your practice and your workouts if you're intentional. This is just another one of those things. Pick a time to rest and be intentional about resting. And then the last one says, tell somebody about it. Because when you tell somebody about it, they can hold you accountable. And you can't just sweep this under the rug and pretend you didn't even think about it, Sabbath.
Well, will you make sure that I watch football today?
I can do that.
Stacy,
Yeah.
I heard through the grapevine that, last week we talked about Ruah and we chose the Hearthstones. What I do with my life group is that they choose a Hearthstone every week, and then I write it down, and then every morning I text them with whatever Hearthstone they chose so that they remember throughout the week which word they had. And I heard through the grapevine last week that a lot of you, the stone you picked really applied to your life.
Oh, that's cool.
So if you would like, I brought the Hearthstones with me. So as you leave, to ask God, what is it that I need during the week? And then I'll get your, I'll have you write down your name, your phone number, and the word, and I will send you a reminder every day
That's
on
cool, Janice.
the stone that you pick, and I think that can work part of your rest
I think so too.
to focus on how the stone impacts your life.
That's a great idea.
Hey, boss.